The train car smelled of coal smoke and unwashed bodies. Theodora Winters sat pressed against the window, watching Montana Territory roll past in endless waves of brown grass and gray sky. November 1889. And the world looked as cold as she felt. Her carpet bag sat between her feet. Everything she owned fit inside it. 3 dresses, one of them nearly threadbare. A hairbrush with missing bristles. 2 books on educational theory that nobody would ever let her use again. And at the bottom, wrapped in an old handkerchief, a stack of newspaper clippings she couldn't bring herself to throw away. She'd read them so many times she had them memorized. But her fingers found them anyway, pulling out the top one. The paper had gone soft from handling the ink starting to blur. Scandal at Belmont Academy headmistress accused of improper conduct. She didn't need to read further. She knew every word. How Aldrich Pemberton, respected member of the school board, married father of 3, had testified that she pursued him inappropriately. How he'd shown the board letters intimate letters that she swore she'd never written. How other board members spoke of her dangerous teaching methods, filling young ladies' heads with unsuitable ideas about mathematics and natural philosophy. How they'd stripped her of her teaching certificate within a week. That had been spring of 1888. A year and a half ago, though. It felt like a lifetime. She'd spent the summer of '88 trying to find another position. Any position. But Pemberton's reach was long, his reputation impeccable, and her name was poison. By fall, she couldn't afford her boarding house. By winter, she was sleeping in a church basement, taking in mending for pennies. She'd been the youngest headmistress in Boston. At 24, she'd thought the world was opening before her like a book. Now, at 31, she was a mail-order bride heading to Montana to marry a man she'd never met. The irony wasn't lost on her. The train lurched and Theodora caught herself against the window. Her reflection stared back at her. Dark hair pulled into a severe bun. Gray eyes that had learned not to hope for much. A face that might have been pretty if it hadn't forgotten how to smile. She looked like what she was, a woman with nowhere else to go. The conductor called out Copper Ridge, and Theodora's stomach dropped. She stood gripping her bag and made her way to the door. The other passengers gave her space. They always did. Something about her warned people away. Shame, maybe, or just the particular kind of loneliness that comes from having nothing left to lose. The platform was nearly empty. A few miners heading home from the saloon weaving slightly. An old woman selling meat pies from a cart. Her breath steaming in the cold air. And at the far end, a man waiting, tall. That was Theodora's first impression. Tall and solid with the kind of shoulders that came from years of hard work. He wore a sheepskin coat against the November wind, a hat pulled low enough to shadow his face. But she could see his eyes. Gray like her own, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. She walked toward him, each step feeling like surrender. He removed his hat as she approached. Dark hair, some gray at the temples. Maybe 35. Weathered in the way frontier men got weathered, but not unkind. His hands were rough scarred, the hands of someone who built things and broke things and held things together through sheer will. Miss Winters. His voice was low, rough-edged with that particular Western accent that turned statements into something close to questions. Mr. Brennan. She kept her own voice steady. Thank you for coming. Silas, he said. We'll be partners in this, not employer and employee. Partners. The word hung in the cold air between them. Theodora studied him, trying to understand what he saw when he looked at her. The advertisement she'd answered had been carefully worded. Seeking educated woman for marriage. Primary duty teach 3 nieces. Must be respectable, patient, and willing to accept frontier life. Room board and fair wage provided. No romantic expectations unless mutual. She'd answered it because of that last line. No romantic expectations. After Pemberton, the thought of any man touching her made her skin crawl. But 3 nieces who needed teaching that she could do, that she was built for. Even if they'd taken away her certificate, they couldn't take away what she knew what she could teach. I appreciate the arrangement, she said carefully. I know it's unusual. Nothing's usual out here. Silas picked up her bag without asking, light as if it weighed nothing. Wagons this way. The wagon was a sturdy freight rig with 2 heavy draft horses stamping in the cold. Silas helped her up to the bench seat, his grip firm, but not lingering, and climbed up beside her. He didn't speak as he guided the horses out of town and onto the road heading north. The silence stretched. Theodora watched the landscape roll past. Miles and miles of nothing. No buildings, no people, just grass and sky and the distant shapes of mountains. It made Boston feel like a dream, like a place she'd imagined where buildings crowded together and people lived on top of each other, and you could walk for hours without ever being truly alone. Out here you could scream and nobody would hear you. It's 12 miles to the ranch, Silas said finally. We'll be there before full dark if the weather holds. Theodora nodded. Then, because the silence was worse than the words, she asked, Your nieces, how old are they? Lily just turned 7, Ruth's 9, Margaret's 12, and they've had no formal schooling. I taught them what I could, reading basic sums. But Margaret's smart, smarter than I ever was. She needs more than I can give her. There was something in his voice, not shame exactly, but a kind of frustration. The frustration of a man who knew his limits and hated them. The nearest school is in Bannock, he continued. 40 miles. Boarding school in Helena. But that costs money I don't have. And even if I did, he paused. I need them close. They're all I've got. Theodora heard what he didn't say. These children had already lost someone. Their mother, probably. And Silas wasn't ready to lose them too. What happened to their mother? She asked quietly. My sister died 5 years back. Childbirth fever. The baby didn't make it either. I'm sorry. So am I. They rode in silence for a while. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that seemed impossible after the gray of the day. Theodora watched the colors shift and tried not to think about the last time she'd seen a sunset this beautiful. It had been from the window of her office at Belmont Academy the night before Pemberton cornered her in the storage room and changed her life forever. Can I ask you something? Silas said. Theodora tensed. Go ahead. Why would a woman with your education, your training, answer an advertisement like mine? You could teach anywhere. You could have a real position, not just, he gestured vaguely, this. She'd known the question would come. She'd prepared an answer, something vague about wanting a fresh start, about the appeal of frontier life. But sitting there in the fading light with this man who'd been honest about his own limits, the prepared words felt like ash in her mouth. I can't teach anywhere," she said quietly. "I was dismissed from my position. My teaching certificate was revoked. No school in Boston would hire me. No school anywhere in the East would hire me." Silas was quiet for a moment. Then, "What did they say you did?" "They said I pursued a married man inappropriately, that I taught unsuitable subjects to young ladies, that I was a danger to my students." "And did you—" The question was direct, not accusatory, just asking. "No." The word came out harder than she intended. "The man pursued me. I refused him, so he destroyed me instead." Silas nodded slowly. "I've known men like that. Men who think the world owes them whatever they want, and God help anyone who says no. Do you believe me?" He looked at her, then really looked at her. "I believe a woman doesn't cross half a continent to marry a stranger unless she's running from something. And I believe running doesn't make you guilty." Something loosened in Theodora's chest. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of something like it. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't met the girls." The ranch appeared as full darkness settled. Theodora could see lamplight glowing warm in windows, smoke rising from a chimney. The main house was 2 stories solid timber construction, with a wide porch. Beyond it, she could make out the shapes of barns, outbuildings, corrals. Bigger than she'd expected, more established. Silas pulled the wagon up to the main house and set the brake. "Come on." Inside the house was warm and spare. Wood floors, stone fireplace furniture that looked handmade but sturdy. And 3 girls standing in a row by the kitchen table, watching her with identical expressions of wariness. The youngest, Lily, was hiding half behind her middle sister. Small for 7, with blonde hair in braids and eyes too big for her face. The middle one, Ruth, stood with her arms crossed, dark hair wild around her shoulders, scowling. And the oldest, Margaret, watched with an intelligence that reminded Theodora uncomfortably of her best students at Belmont, the ones who saw too much and understood too well. "Girls," Silas said, "this is Miss Winters. She's going to be staying with us, teaching you." "We don't need a teacher," Ruth said immediately. "Pa teaches us just fine." "Ruth," Silas said, and there was something in his voice that made the girl's mouth snap shut. Theodora stepped forward. She'd done this before, faced rooms full of skeptical students who thought they knew better than she did. The trick was to meet them where they were, not where you wish they'd be. "You're right," she said to Ruth. "Your uncle has taught you well. I can see that. But there are things I can teach you that he can't. Not because he's not capable, but because he has a ranch to run. And I have time to focus just on you 3. Ruth's scowl didn't fade, but something shifted in her eyes. Consideration, maybe. Lily peeked out from behind her sister. "Are you gonna marry Uncle Silas?" The question hung in the air. Theodora glanced at Silas, who looked somewhere between amused and mortified. "That's complicated," Theodora said carefully. "For now, I'm here to teach you. The rest we'll figure out as we go." Margaret spoke for the first time. "What can you teach us that Pa can't? What do you want to learn?" The girl blinked clearly, not expecting the question to be turned back on her. "Everything," she said after a moment. "I want to know everything." Theodora felt something stir in her chest. Recognition. She'd been that girl once, hungry for knowledge, frustrated by limits, burning with questions nobody wanted to answer. "Then that's what we'll work on," she said. "Everything." Dinner was awkward and mostly silent. The girls picked at their food, sneaking glances at Theodora when they thought she wasn't looking. Silas made a few attempts at conversation, asking about the journey, the weather, anything to fill the quiet. Theodora answered in brief sentences, too aware of being watched, judged, measured. After dinner, Silas showed her to a small room on the second floor, plain but clean. A bed, a dresser, a chair. A window that looked out over dark land. "Separate bedrooms," he said, standing in the doorway. "Like I said in the letter, take your time deciding about, well, everything else." "Thank you." He nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "Theodora, can I ask you one more thing?" "Of course." "Why teaching with your education? You could have done anything. Why choose to spend your life in a schoolroom?" The question surprised her. Nobody had ever asked her that before. They'd asked why she thought women should be educated, why she taught unsuitable subjects, why she couldn't just accept her place. But never why teaching itself. Because, yeah, she said slowly, "When I was 8 years old, a teacher told me I was too clever for my own good, that smart girls made poor wives, that I should stop asking questions and learn to be quiet." She met Silas's eyes. "I decided then that if I ever had the chance, I would teach girls that their questions mattered, that being clever was a gift, not a curse, that they didn't have to be quiet." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Margaret's gonna love you." After he left, Theodora unpacked her bag. It didn't take long. Everything she owned laid out on the dresser looked pathetic. 3 dresses, 2 books, 1 life reduced to what could fit in a carpet bag. She pulled out the newspaper clippings last, spreading them on the bed. The headlines screamed up at her. Scandal. Improper conduct. Dismissed. She should burn them. She knew that. Keeping them was like keeping a wound open, never letting it heal. But they were also proof. Proof that she'd been someone once. Proof that what happened to her was real, not imagined. Proof that she had every right to the anger that still burned in her chest like a coal. She gathered them up, wrapped them back in the handkerchief, and tucked them into the bottom drawer of the dresser. Not burned. Not forgotten. Just put away. For now. The next morning, Theodora woke to gray dawn light and the sound of voices downstairs. She dressed quickly, braided her hair, and went down to find the kitchen full of activity. Silas was making coffee. The girls were setting the table, moving around each other, with the practiced ease of long routine. "Morning," Silas said. "Coffee." "Please." He poured her a cup, strong and black. Theodora wrapped her hands around it and felt the warmth seep into her fingers. "Town meeting today," Silas said, "about the school situation. I thought you should come." "What school situation?" "Schoolhouse burned down last spring. Lightning strike. Town's been arguing ever since about whether to rebuild." Theodora set down her coffee. Why would they argue about that? Money, mostly, but also what kind of school, who teaches, what gets taught. He paused. "There's some folks think Eastern ideas don't belong out here. That book learning makes children unsuitable for frontier life." "And what do you think?" "I think Silas said carefully that children deserve to know how to read and cipher and think for themselves. And I think people who are afraid of education are usually afraid of something else. The town meeting was held in the largest building in Copper Ridge, which was the saloon. Theodora walked in with Silas and immediately felt every eye in the room turn to her. The weight of their stares was physical pressing against her skin. The room was packed. Maybe 70 people crowded onto benches and standing along the walls. Miners in work clothes. Women in calico dresses. A few men in suits who looked like they had money. And at the front, a man in a pastor's collar who watched her approach with obvious suspicion. "That's Pastor Emmett Cole," Silas murmured. "Careful with him. He's got influence." They found seats near the back. A woman on the bench in front of them turned around, eyeing Theodora with frank curiosity. "You're the mail-order bride," she said. "Not a question. I'm Theodora Winters. Vera Walsh. I run the saloon." The woman grinned. "Which makes me about as respectable as a woman can be in this town, without boring herself to death." Theodora found herself smiling back despite herself. "Pleased to meet you." "Likewise. We need more women here with some spine." Vera glanced at Silas. "You picked a good one, Brennan. I can tell." The meeting came to order with Pastor Cole banging on the makeshift podium. "We're here to discuss the school situation. As everyone knows, our schoolhouse burned down 6 months ago. The question before us is whether to rebuild, and if so, what kind of school we want." A man in an expensive suit stood up. Theodora recognized the type immediately. Money ambition and the smooth confidence that came from never being told no. "I'm Daniel Hargrave," he said. "For those who don't know me, I own the Silver Star Mine. I propose we rebuild the school, but we need to be strategic about it. We need a proper teacher, someone with credentials, not just anyone who can read." His eyes flicked to Theodora, and she felt the dig. Silas stood. "I have a proposal. My nieces need education. So do a lot of children in this area. While the town decides about the schoolhouse, Miss Winters could teach in my barn. Families who want to send their children would be welcome." The room erupted. "We don't know this woman," someone called out. "What qualifications does she have?" another voice added. Pastor Cole held up his hand for quiet. "Mr. Brennan, with all due respect, this is a serious matter. Education shapes young minds. We need to know what would be taught, what ideas would be planted." Theodora felt Silas tense beside her, preparing to defend her. But something in her had had enough. Enough of being talked about like she wasn't there. Enough of men deciding her worth. Enough of sitting quiet while others determined her fate. She stood. The room fell silent. "My name is Theodora Winters," she said, and was pleased to hear her voice carry clear and steady. "I was headmistress of Belmont Academy for young ladies in Boston. I taught literature, mathematics, natural philosophy, and Latin. I believe every child, regardless of gender, deserves education. Real education. Not just reading and sums, but critical thinking. Science. History. The tools to understand the world around them." Pastor Cole's face had gone tight. "Those are precisely the kind of Eastern ideas I'm concerned about. We don't need our children, especially our daughters, filled with unsuitable notions. Unsuitable notions like literacy," Theodora heard herself say, "like being able to calculate the fair price for goods at the store. like understanding the natural world. Which of those exactly is unsuitable? A woman in the crowd laughed quickly, stifled. Hargrave stood again. This is exactly my point. We don't know Miss Winters. We don't know her background. For all we know, she could be teaching radical ideas, corrupting our children. I taught girls that their minds mattered, Theodora said, and now there was steel in her voice. That intelligence wasn't unwomanly, that they had value beyond their ability to please men. If that's radical to you, Mr. Hargrave, then yes, I'm radical. And I'm not going to apologize for it. The silence that followed was different, charged. Then Vera Walsh stood up. My nephew can't read. He's 10 years old, and he can't read because we haven't had a teacher in 6 months. I don't care if Miss Winters is radical or conservative or from the moon. If she can teach him to read, I'm sending him to that barn. A murmur ran through the crowd. Not agreement exactly, but consideration. Pastor Cole tried to regain control. We'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of allowing Mr. Brennan to operate a private school on his property, raise your hands. The vote was close. Maybe 20 hands went up immediately. Then a few more hesitant. Then a few more. All opposed. About the same number of hands. The motion carries, Pastor Cole said, clearly unhappy about it. But I want it noted that this is a trial arrangement. Any complaints, any concerns will be taken seriously. Walking back to the wagon, Theodora's hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something else. Something that felt almost like hope. You did good in there, Silas said quietly. I made enemies. You spoke truth. Sometimes that's the same thing. That night, Theodora couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the meeting, about the faces in that crowd. Some hostile, some curious, some desperately hopeful. Children who needed teaching, trapped in a town that couldn't decide if education was a gift or a threat. She got up, lit a candle, and went downstairs. The house was quiet. But as she passed the girls' room, she saw a line of light under the door. She knocked softly. Margaret, come in. The girl was sitting up in bed, a book open in her lap. Not a child's book, something thick and complex. She closed it quickly as Theodora entered, but not before Theodora saw the title. Is that Darwin? She asked quietly. Margaret's face went pale. I found it. In a box of my mother's things. I shouldn't have. I know it's not proper for girls to read about science, but I just wanted to know, I wanted to understand. Theodora sat down on the edge of the bed. Can I see it? Trembling, Margaret handed over the book. On the Origin of Species. Well-worn pages marked with careful notes in the margins. Someone had loved this book, studied it deeply. Your mother read this. She read everything. Pa says she was the smartest person he ever knew. But she never told anyone. She kept all her books hidden. Margaret's voice dropped to a whisper. Because smart girls don't get married. That's what people say. Smart girls end up alone. Theodora thought about her own mother who'd hidden her intelligence behind needlework and pleasant smiles. Thought about every woman she'd ever known who'd learned to make herself smaller, quieter, less. Thought about the girl she'd been told her questions were unwomanly, her curiosity unsuitable. Your mother was wrong to hide, she said gently. and the people who told her to hide were wrong. Intelligence isn't something to be ashamed of, Margaret. It's a gift. But what good is a gift if using it makes people hate you? The question cut deep. Theodora had asked herself the same thing 1,000 times. Standing in front of the school board, watching them choose to believe Pemberton's lies rather than her truth. Sitting in that church basement, hungry and alone, wondering if she'd been a fool to fight back. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I don't know if it's worth it. But I know that hiding who you are, making yourself smaller, to please others, that kills you slowly. Maybe not your body, but everything that makes you who you are." Margaret looked down at the book in Theodora's hands. "Will you teach me? Really teach me, not just reading and sums, but real things?" Every day, Theodora promised, everything you want to learn. The first students arrived the next morning, 5 of them. Silas's 3 nieces plus Vera Walsh's nephew and 1 other boy, son of a blacksmith. Not much, but it was a start. Theodora had spent the night preparing the barn. Silas had helped moving out equipment, setting up rough benches, hauling in a table to serve as her desk. It wasn't much. It wasn't even close to the facilities she'd had at Belmont Academy. But it was hers. She started by assessing what they knew. Lily could barely read, stumbling over simple words. Ruth knew her letters but resisted reading aloud. Margaret could read at a level far beyond her years, but her mathematics was shaky. The boys were somewhere in between, taught sporadically by parents who'd had little formal education themselves. "All right," Theodora said. "We're going to do things differently here. I'm not going to have you memorize things you don't understand. We're going to learn by doing." She started with mathematics, but not from a textbook. She had the boys calculate the dimensions of the barn, figure out how many boards it would take to build another one this size. She had the girls work through real ranch accounting, adding up the cost of feed and supplies. "Why do we need to know this?" Ruth asked, sullen. "Because," Theodora said, "someday you're going to need to know if someone's cheating you. Or you're going to want to build something and you'll need to know how much material to buy. Or you're going to run a business and you'll need to track your expenses. Mathematics isn't about numbers on a page. It's about understanding the world well enough to live in it on your own terms." Something shifted in Ruth's expression. Not quite acceptance, but interest. For reading, she brought in newspapers, letters, anything with real information. She had them read about mining techniques, cattle diseases, political debates. Things that mattered to their lives, not fairy tales and moral lessons. And for Margaret, after the other students left, she taught advanced subjects, real science, philosophy, history beyond dates and names. They sat in the barn as the light faded, talking about natural selection and the age of the earth, and whether societies were shaped by great individuals or underlying forces. "You can't tell Pa about this," Margaret said one evening. "He'll worry. He'll think I'm getting ideas above my station. You can't spend your life making yourself smaller for other people's comfort," Theodora said. "Trust me. I tried. It doesn't work." 3 weeks in, Ruth came to class squinting. "What's wrong with your eyes?" Theodora asked. "Nothing." But Theodora had taught long enough to recognize the signs. She held up a book, moved it farther away. "Can you read this?" Ruth squinted harder, then admitted, Not really. Nearsightedness. Common enough and easily corrected. But out here, how many children went through life half blind simply because nobody noticed Theodora fashioned crude glasses from a magnifying lens and wire? Not elegant, but functional. When Ruth put them on and gasped at how clear the world suddenly was, Theodora felt something warm unfold in her chest. This was why she taught. Not for credentials or recognition or even respect. For moments like this. The moment a child's world expanded and you got to witness it. Word spread slowly. The blacksmith told his friends about Ruth's glasses, about how the strange Eastern teacher had noticed what nobody else had. More families started sending their children. By the end of the first month, she had 10 students. It wasn't triumph, not yet. But it was progress. And that evening, when Silas found her in the barn tallying up lesson plans, he said, "The town's starting to talk. Some of it's not friendly, but some of it is. Vera Walsh told me 4 more families are thinking about sending their children." Theodora looked up at him. "Thank you for giving me this chance. You're earning it." They stood there in the lamplight, and Theodora felt something she hadn't felt in over a year. Not happiness exactly, but possibility. The sense that maybe she could build something here. Something that mattered. "Silas," she said, "can I ask you something? Always. Why did you really place that advertisement? You could have hired a teacher without the marriage part. Why tie them together?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I'm tired," he said finally. "Tired of doing this alone. Raising those girls, running this ranch, trying to be enough for everyone. I thought maybe if I found someone to share it with, someone who understood what it meant to fight for something that mattered." He paused. "I didn't expect to find you. Someone who'd already fought and lost and was willing to fight again anyway. I haven't won anything yet. You're still here. That's winning." And maybe it was the lamplight or the late hour or the simple kindness in his voice. But Theodora found herself telling him the truth. "I almost ran," she said, "that first night. I was ready to get back on the train and disappear, because I was so tired of fighting, so tired of being brave." "What stopped you?" "Margaret." Theodora smiled slightly. "She told me if I left, I'd be teaching her that powerful people always win, that there's no point in fighting back. And I couldn't do that to her." Silas nodded slowly. "She's a lot like you, I think. Smart enough to see the world as it is. Brave enough to want to change it. I'm not brave." "Yes, you are. Bravery isn't not being afraid. It's being terrified and doing it anyway." They stood there in comfortable silence, and Theodora felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not trust, not quiet, but the possibility of it. The sense that maybe this man saw her, really saw her, and wasn't running away. The evening before Thanksgiving, the town held a small social at the saloon. Music, dancing, a chance for the community to come together before winter set in hard. Silas asked Theodora to come with him, and she found herself agreeing despite her better judgment. She wore her best dress, which wasn't saying much. But Vera Walsh caught her before they went in and said, "You look lovely. And more importantly, you look like someone who belongs here." The social was loud and warm and overwhelming. Theodora stood near the wall watching couples dance, trying not to feel like an outsider. But then Silas appeared at her elbow. Dance. I'm not very good. Neither am I. Come on. His hand was warm and rough in hers as he led her onto the floor. The music was a simple waltz, and Silas moved with surprising grace for such a large man. They turned together in the lamplight, and Theodora felt the eyes of the town on them. Let them look, she thought. Let them judge. She was here, she was teaching, and she wasn't going anywhere. You're smiling, Silas said. Am I? First time I've seen it. Suits you. And Theodora realized he was right. She was smiling. Genuinely smiling. The weight she'd been carrying for 18 months. The shame and the anger and the fear, it was still there. But it felt lighter somehow. Manageable. They danced until the music ended. And when Silas walked her back to the edge of the room, he said quietly, I'm glad you're here, Theodora. I want you to know that. I'm glad too, she said, and found she meant it. The next morning, a telegram arrived at the general store. It sat there for 2 days before anyone thought to mention it to Silas. When he opened it, his face went pale. Theodora was in the barn with her students when he appeared in the doorway. Something in his expression made her dismiss the children early. What is it? She asked when they were alone. He handed her the telegram without a word. It was from the Montana Pacific Railroad Company. Brief and businesslike. Aldrich Pemberton, Director of Western Expansion, arriving December 1st to discuss right-of-way agreements and community development opportunities. Lodging required. Theodora read it 3 times before the words penetrated. Then her legs gave out and she sat down hard on the nearest bench. Theodora. Silas was beside her immediately. What is it? Do you know this man? She couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The telegram shook in her hands. That's him. She finally managed. The man from Boston. The one who destroyed me. And just like that, the fragile hope she'd been building shattered like glass. Silas caught her before she hit the floor. His hands were steady even though hers were shaking so hard she couldn't hold the telegram anymore. It fluttered to the ground between them, that thin piece of paper that had just destroyed everything. Tell me, he said quietly. Not a demand. An invitation. So she told him. All of it. The full story this time, not the sanitized version she'd given on the wagon ride from town. She told him about the late afternoon when Pemberton had cornered her in the storage room at Belmont Academy, how his hands had grabbed at her waist. Her shoulders, how his breath had smelled of whiskey and entitlement. How she'd pushed him away so hard he'd stumbled. How he'd looked at her with something ugly in his eyes and said, "You'll regret that." She told him about the board meeting 3 days later. About the letters Pemberton produced. Love letters supposedly written by her intimate and desperate. About the testimony from other board members who'd heard her teaching unsuitable subjects, filling young ladies' heads with dangerous ideas. About how quickly it had all fallen apart, and she told him about the 1.5 years that followed. The slow starvation of hope. The way doors closed in her face, one after another. The church basement. The mending work that barely kept her fed. The moment she'd realized there was nothing left for her in Boston. Nothing left anywhere. And the only way forward was to become someone's mail-order bride, and pray he was kind. When she finished, the barn was very quiet. Silas hadn't let go of her. His hands were still on her shoulders, grounding her. "He's coming here," she said, and her voice sounded hollow even to herself. "He's coming and he's going to destroy everything again. The teaching the children you all of it. That's what he does. He can't stand the idea that I survived him." "Let him come," Silas said. "You don't understand. He's powerful. He has money connections, the weight of the entire Eastern establishment behind him. And I have nothing. I'm a disgraced teacher in a barn with 10 students. He'll crush me. Not this time." Theodora pulled away from him, stood up on shaking legs. "Yes, this time. You think Montana is different from Boston? People are the same everywhere. They'll believe him because he's respectable, and I'm not. They'll choose his word over mine because that's what people do. Power protects power. Then we fight back. I can't." The words came out broken. "I can't do this again. I barely survived the first time." That night, Theodora couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. In her mind, she was already gone, already on a train heading west or south or anywhere that wasn't here, anywhere Pemberton couldn't find her. She'd failed in Boston. She would fail here too. Better to leave now before the children got too attached, before Silas invested any more in defending her. Better to cut the loss early. At 3 in the morning, she got up and packed her bag. It didn't take long. She still didn't own much. 3 dresses, 2 books, a life that fit in a carpet bag. She left the newspaper clippings in the drawer. She didn't need them anymore. She knew what she was. A coward. She was halfway down the stairs when she saw the figure sitting in the kitchen. Margaret wrapped in a quilt, a candle burning on the table in front of her. "You're leaving," the girl said. Not a question. Theodora set down her bag. "How did you know?" "I couldn't sleep either. I heard you packing." Margaret looked at her, and there was something in her eyes that made Theodora want to weep. Disappointment, understanding, and underneath it all, fear. Just like Mama. Your mother didn't choose to leave. No, but you are. Margaret stood up. "You're going to run away and leave us here just like everyone always does. And you're going to tell yourself, it's for our own good, that you're protecting us. But really, you're just scared." The words hit like a slap. "Margaret, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. That man hurt you. He took everything from you. And now he's coming back to do it again, so you're running." The girl's voice cracked. "I read your newspaper clippings. I know what he did. I know he lied. I know the board believed him instead of you. And I know it wasn't fair." Theodora felt tears burning in her eyes. "Then you know why I can't stay?" "No, I know why you're afraid. That's different." Margaret crossed to her, and somehow this 12-year-old girl looked older than her years, wiser than she should have to be. "You told me that hiding who you are kills you slowly. You told me that intelligence isn't something to be ashamed of. You told me I didn't have to make myself smaller for other people's comfort. This is different." "How? Because he's powerful. Because he's a man. Because the system protected him before." Margaret's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. If you leave now, you're teaching me that he was right. That powerful men always win. That there's no point in fighting back. Is that what you want to teach me? Theodora sank into a chair. I'm not strong enough to fight him again. I barely survived the first time. You're not alone this time. Margaret sat down beside her. You have Pa. You have us. You have this whole town that you've earned. People here know you. They've seen what you can do. That's different from Boston. They'll still believe him. Maybe some will, but not all. And the ones who matter, the ones who've actually seen you teach, seen you care, seen you make Ruth able to see clearly for the first time in her life. Margaret paused. They won't believe him. Not without a fight. Theodora looked at this child who'd lost her mother, who'd spent years hiding her intelligence, who'd been told smart girls ended up alone. And she saw herself, the girl she'd been hungry for knowledge and terrified of being punished for it. The woman she'd become still carrying that fear like a weight. What if I fail? She whispered. Then you fail. But at least you'll fail fighting. That's better than running. They sat together in the candlelight until dawn began to gray the windows. And when Silas came downstairs and saw Theodora's bag by the door, saw the two of them sitting there, his face went carefully blank. You're leaving, he said. I was. Theodora stood up. But I'm not. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe. Or hope. What changed your mind? Theodora looked at Margaret. Someone reminded me what I was teaching. The next morning, Silas called a meeting. Not the whole town, just the people he trusted. Vera Walsh showed up first, eyes sharp and curious. Then Pastor Cole, which surprised Theodora until Silas explained quietly that the pastor had daughters of his own and had been asking about lessons. Mrs. Greta Hoffman, the German midwife who'd lived in Montana Territory for 30 years and had seen everything twice, and a few others. 8 people total sitting around Silas's kitchen table. Aldrich Pemberton is coming to Copper Ridge, Silas said without preamble. He's the man who destroyed Theodora's career in Boston. He's coming here to do it again. Vera leaned forward. Why, what does he gain from it? Control, Theodora said. He can't stand the idea that I said no to him and survived. Every day I teach every child I help. I prove that a woman doesn't need a man's approval to have value. He can't allow that. Pastor Cole frowned. But he's coming here for railroad business. The telegram said right-of-way agreements. That's his cover, Silas said. But think about it. Montana Pacific has surveyors. They have lawyers. They don't need their director of Western expansion to personally visit every small town. He's coming here because Theodora is here. Mrs. Hoffman spoke for the first time, her accent thick, but her words precise. So what do? We build a case, Silas said. Before he can tear Theodora down, we show everyone who she really is, what she's accomplished. We get ahead of his lies. How? Vera asked. Theodora took a breath. We document everything. Every student's progress. Letters from families. Testimonials about what the children have learned. We show the town concrete proof that I'm a good teacher, that the children are thriving. And when Pemberton comes with his accusations, we have evidence to counter him. He'll have evidence too, Pastor Cole said quietly. Whatever he used in Boston. Letters, testimony, all of it. Forgeries, Theodora said, but convincing ones. Can you prove they're fake? She couldn't. That was the problem. She'd never been able to prove the letters weren't hers, that the complaints hadn't been legitimate. All she'd had was her word against his, and his word had carried more weight. We don't have to prove his evidence is fake, Vera said slowly. We just have to prove hers is real. Over the next 2 weeks, they worked. Theodora documented every lesson, every student's progress. She had the children demonstrate what they'd learned. Ruth stood in front of a group of skeptical mothers and read an entire newspaper article without stumbling. Lily showed how she could add and subtract. The boys explained the mathematics of building construction, calculating board feet and angles. Margaret did something more. She compiled a portfolio of Theodora's teaching methods, complete with examples and outcomes. Charts showing how students who'd been illiterate were now reading at grade level. Calculations proving that children who'd struggled with basic arithmetic could now handle complex problems. It was thorough professional, the work of someone who understood how to make an argument with evidence. Where did you learn to do this? Theodora asked, looking through the portfolio. From you, Margaret said simply. You taught me that evidence matters more than opinion. That you can't just say something is true, you have to prove it. Pastor Cole brought testimonials from parents. Vera Walsh organized a petition. Mrs. Hoffman, who turned out to have connections across the territory, wrote to other communities asking if they'd had problems with railroad men making promises they didn't keep. But underneath all the preparation, Theodora felt the fear building. Because she knew how this worked. She'd lived it before. No matter how much evidence they gathered, Pemberton was good at what he did. He was charming, authoritative, backed by institutions and money. He knew how to make people believe him. And he was coming. The telegram announcing his arrival came on November 28th. He would reach Copper Ridge on December 1st. 3 days. Theodora spent those days in a state of controlled panic. She taught her classes during the day, but her mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios, preparing for attacks she couldn't quite predict. At night, she lay awake, imagining the moment he would walk back into her life and destroy it all over again. Silas found her in the barn the evening before Pemberton's arrival. She was sitting at her makeshift desk, staring at nothing. You don't have to face him alone, he said. I know. I mean it, Theodora. When he comes, I'll be there. We all will. She looked up at him. This man who'd taken her in when she had nowhere else to go, who'd given her a chance when the world had written her off. Who'd believed her story without question? Who'd organized a defense without being asked? Who looked at her like she mattered? Why are you doing this? She asked. Why risk your reputation, your standing in this community for me? Silas pulled up a chair and sat down facing her. You remember what I said in my advertisement? No romantic expectations unless mutual. Yes, I lied. He smiled slightly. Or maybe I was lying to myself. I placed that ad looking for a teacher and told myself the marriage part was just practical. But the truth is I was lonely. Not just for help with the girls. For someone who understood what it meant to fight for something. To believe in something when the whole world tells you you're wrong. Theodora felt her chest tighten. I didn't expect you, Silas continued. I expected some desperate woman who'd take any escape from whatever she was running from. Instead, I got someone brilliant and principled and so goddamn brave she doesn't even see it. Someone who walks into a hostile town and starts teaching children anyway. Someone who looks at my niece and sees not just a student but a person whose mind matters. He paused. Someone I could love. Someone I think I already do. The words hung in the air between them. Theodora couldn't breathe. I know the timing is terrible, Silas said. I know you have enough to worry about without me adding this. But I needed you to know. When Pemberton comes, when he tries to destroy you, I want you to remember that you're not fighting alone. And you're not fighting for just survival anymore. You're fighting for this. For us. For what we could build together. Theodora stood up and crossed to him. She didn't know what to say, didn't trust her voice. So instead, she leaned down and kissed him. His arms came around her, strong and steady, and for just a moment the fear receded. When they pulled apart, she said quietly, I love you too. I didn't mean to. I didn't think I could anymore. But I do. Then we fight for that, Silas said. Together. Pemberton arrived on schedule. Theodora was teaching when she heard the train whistle, and her hands started shaking so badly she had to dismiss the students early. They filed out looking confused and worried, and Margaret lingered. It's going to be all right, the girl said with more confidence than she should have felt. I hope so. Theodora walked to town with Silas. The whole way her heart hammered against her ribs. She kept expecting to see him around every corner, kept bracing for the moment when his eyes would find her, and she'd see that look again. The one that said he owned her, controlled her, would never let her escape. The town had gathered near the depot. Word had spread that the railroad man was coming and people were curious. Some hopeful about the jobs and prosperity a railroad might bring. Others suspicious of Eastern businessmen making promises. The train pulled in with a hiss of steam. And then he was there. Aldrich Pemberton stepped onto the platform like he owned it. Expensive suit, silver hair, perfectly groomed, the kind of face that made people think respectable, trustworthy, important. He was 45 now, and the years had been kind to him. He looked successful, powerful, exactly like the kind of man whose word you'd believe. His eyes swept the crowd and found her immediately. For just a second, his expression shifted. Shock, then calculation, then something that might have been satisfaction. He smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice carrying across the platform. Thank you for this warm welcome. I'm Aldrich Pemberton, representing Montana Pacific Railroad. I'm here to discuss opportunities that could transform Copper Ridge into a thriving hub of commerce. The crowd murmured. Daniel Hargrave pushed forward, hand extended. Mr. Pemberton, welcome. I'm Daniel Hargrave, owner of the Silver Star Mine. We're very interested in what the railroad might mean for our community. Pemberton shook his hand warmly. Excellent. I look forward to our discussions. His eyes drifted back to Theodora. But first, I must say how surprised I am to see a familiar face here. Miss Winters and I are acquainted from Boston. What a small world. The words were innocent enough, but Theodora heard the threat underneath them. That evening there was a town meeting to hear Pemberton's proposal. Theodora wanted to stay away, but Silas convinced her they needed to show strength, not hide. The saloon was packed. Pemberton stood at the front, maps and papers spread on a table before him. He painted a beautiful picture. Railroad coming through Copper Ridge, connecting the town to markets in Helena and beyond. Jobs for miners and ranchers. Regular supply shipments. Mail service. Prosperity. All we need us here, he said smoothly, is the right-of-way agreement. The railroad would purchase a corridor of land through town at fair market price. In return, Copper Ridge would become a regular stop on the line. Everyone benefits. Hargrave was nodding enthusiastically. So were several other businessmen. The promises were seductive. But then Pemberton shifted gears. Of course, the railroad needs to ensure that communities we invest in are stable and respectable. We can't do business with towns that have, shall we say, questionable elements. His eyes found Theodora, which brings me to a delicate matter. The room went quiet. I was shocked to discover that my old acquaintance Miss Winters is teaching children here. Shocked because in Boston she was dismissed from her position at Belmont Academy for highly inappropriate conduct. Theodora felt every eye in the room turn to her. I have documentation. Pemberton continued pulling papers from his case. Letters showing an improper relationship with a married man, namely myself. Complaints from parents about unsuitable subjects being taught. The formal dismissal letter from the Academy's board. All of it painting a very clear picture of someone who should not be educating children. He spread the papers on the table. I bring this up not to embarrass Miss Winters, but because the railroad needs to know that communities we invest in have high moral standards. If Copper Ridge employs someone of questionable character to teach its children well, that raises concerns about the town's judgment. The implication was clear. Accept his railroad deal, get rid of Theodora. Reject one or both. Silas stood up. Those accusations were investigated in Montana. Miss Winters was found fit to teach. Investigated by whom? Pemberton asked pleasantly. As I understand it, she's teaching in a barn on private property. There's been no formal review by any educational authority. We've seen her work, Vera Walsh said. The children are learning. I'm sure they are. Miss Winters is intelligent, I never disputed that. But intelligence without moral character is dangerous, especially in someone shaping young minds. Pastor Cole rose slowly. Mr. Pemberton, these are serious accusations. But Miss Winters has been teaching here for 2 months. In that time, I've seen nothing but dedicated work and genuine care for the children. With all due respect, Pastor, 2 months isn't long enough to see someone's true character. I worked with Miss Winters for years. I know what she's capable of. Pemberton's voice turned gentle, concerned. I understand you're a small community desperate for a teacher. But you deserve better than someone fleeing scandal. Theodora couldn't stay silent anymore. She stood and was pleased when her voice came out steady. Everything Mr. Pemberton just said is a lie. He pursued me, not the other way around. When I refused him, he manufactured evidence and destroyed my career. The letters are forgeries. The complaints were orchestrated. And I came to Montana not fleeing scandal, but escaping a man who couldn't stand being told no. The room erupted. Some people shouting support, others demanding proof, everyone talking at once. Pemberton held up his hands. I understand Miss Winters needs to defend herself, but I have documentation, letters in her handwriting, sworn testimony from multiple sources. What does she have, her word? He looked directly at her. The word of a woman who's already been judged and found wanting by a respected institution. I have testimonials from every family whose children I teach, Theodora said. I have documented proof of student progress. I have a community that knows me. You have 2 months in a small town, Pemberton countered. I have years in Boston's educational establishment. Who's more credible? That was the question, wasn't it? The same question that had destroyed her the first time. The meeting broke up without resolution. People arguing in clusters. Pemberton worked the room, shaking hands, making small talk, positioning himself as the reasonable one, the concerned citizen just trying to help. Theodora walked home feeling like she was drowning. Over the next week, Pemberton launched a careful, systematic campaign. He didn't attack Theodora directly. He was too smart for that. Instead, he raised concerns. Gentle, reasonable concerns about whether someone with a checkered past should be entrusted with children, about whether the town should risk the railroad's investment by keeping controversial employees. He spoke to mothers about the unsuitable subjects Theodora might be teaching. He spoke to fathers about the importance of moral education. He spoke to businessmen about the economic benefits of the railroad and how unfortunate it would be if that opportunity was lost over one woman. And slowly, steadily, opinion began to shift. 3 families pulled their children from Theodora's classes. Then 2 more. The petition Vera had organized started losing signatures. Even Pastor Cole, who defended her, began expressing doubts. I believe you're a good teacher, he told her. But Pemberton's documents are compelling, and the railroad would mean so much for this town. I have to think about what's best for everyone, not just one person. Theodora felt the walls closing in. It was Boston all over again. The same pattern. Pemberton, with his smooth lies and manufactured evidence, gradually turning everyone against her, while maintaining his own respectability. She started having nightmares. In them, she was back in that storage room, Pemberton's hands on her. Except this time there was no escape. This time the door was locked, and the walls were closing in, and she woke up gasping. Silas held her through those nights, but even his presence couldn't quite dispel the fear. Then the investigation started. Vera Walsh had family in Boston. She wrote to them asking questions. Mrs. Hoffman contacted her nephew, who worked as a lawyer in Denver. They dug into Pemberton's past, looking for anything that might discredit him. What they found was a pattern. 3 other towns where Pemberton had worked on railroad deals. 3 other towns where women had been quietly dismissed or driven out shortly before or after his visits. The details were murky, the women reluctant to speak, but the pattern was there. He does this, Vera said grimly, spreading the letters across Silas's kitchen table. He finds women who won't comply, who resist him, and he destroys them. Uses his position to make them disappear. You're not the first, Theodora. You're just the first one who fought back publicly. The information should have been ammunition, should have been the evidence they needed to expose him. But when they tried to present it, Pemberton had answers ready. These are vicious rumors spread by disgruntled former employees, he said smoothly. The railroad deals with many people. Not all of them are satisfied with the outcomes. Some create conspiracy theories rather than accept their own failures. And people believed him because he was convincing, because he had documentation, because he represented money and progress and hope. One afternoon, Theodora was in the barn preparing lesson plans when Margaret burst through the door. "Miss Theo, come quick." Theodora's heart jumped. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I solved it." Margaret's face was flushed with excitement. She held up a piece of paper covered in calculations. "The problem you gave me yesterday, about compound interest and loan payments. I couldn't figure it out last night, but I just kept working on it and I solved it." Theodora took the paper, examined Margaret's work. The girl had not only solved the problem correctly, but had found an elegant shortcut that Theodora herself hadn't considered. "This is brilliant," Theodora said softly. "Really?" Margaret's eyes shone. "You're not just saying that." "No. This is genuinely innovative thinking. You didn't just follow the formula I taught you. You found a better way." Margaret threw her arms around Theodora, and for just a moment the weight of Pemberton's campaign lifted. This was why she taught. Not for the approval of boards or the validation of credentials. For moments like this, when a child's mind opened and something new and beautiful emerged. "Can I show Pa?" Margaret asked. "Of course." They walked back to the house together. Margaret chattering about how she'd approached the problem. The dead ends she'd hit the moment when the solution had clicked into place. Inside, Silas was mending harness leather at the kitchen table. "Pa, look." Margaret spread her calculations across the table. "I solved the compound interest problem." Silas examined the work, his expression careful. He couldn't follow all the mathematics, Theodora knew, but he could see the pride in his niece's eyes. "That's fine work," he said quietly. "Your mother would be proud." Margaret's smile dimmed slightly. Would she really? She would. Silas looked at Theodora. "She wanted this for you. Someone who could teach you the things she couldn't. Someone who could help you use that mind of yours." That evening, after Margaret had gone to bed, still clutching her calculations, Silas and Theodora sat on the porch, watching the stars come out. "Thank you," Silas said quietly. "For what?" "For showing her she's not broken. For making her proud of what she is instead of ashamed of it." He paused. "My sister spent her whole life hiding how smart she was. Died thinking she'd failed somehow because she couldn't be what people expected her to be. I don't want that for Margaret." "She won't have to hide," Theodora said. "Not if I have anything to say about it. That's what I'm afraid of." Silas turned to look at her. "Pemberton's winning, isn't he? I can see it in how people talk, how they look at you." Theodora didn't answer right away. "He's winning the way he always wins, slowly, methodically, making people doubt without them realizing they're being manipulated. Then we fight back harder. I don't know how much harder I can fight." Silas took her hand. "Then rest. Let me fight for a while." For the first time in days, Theodora felt something like peace. She wasn't alone in this. Whatever happened, she wasn't alone. 2 weeks after Pemberton's arrival, Daniel Hargrave called another emergency meeting. Theodora sat in the saloon with her remaining students' families around her. Feeling the weight of hostile stares from across the room, Margaret stood up. A 12-year-old girl standing in a room full of adults, her voice shaking but clear. "I want to testify." Hargrave frowned. "This isn't a trial, child." "No, but you're making a judgment. And I have evidence." She pulled out her portfolio, the one she'd been compiling. "Miss Winters has been teaching me advanced mathematics and natural sciences. Before she came, I could barely do basic arithmetic. Now I can calculate compound interest and understand geological formations. I've documented all of it. My progress, the methods she used, everything." She handed the portfolio to Pastor Cole. "You talk about moral character. Miss Winters taught me that intelligence isn't something to be ashamed of. That asking questions is good. That girls deserve education as much as boys. Is that immoral?" The room was silent. "Mr. Pemberton says she's dangerous," Margaret continued. "Maybe she is. Maybe teaching girls that their minds matter is dangerous to men who want to keep us small and quiet. But that doesn't make it wrong." Pemberton started to speak, but Margaret cut him off. "You have letters you say Miss Winters wrote. But I have this." She held up her portfolio. "Proof of what she's taught me. Proof that she's made me smarter, more capable, more ready to face the world. Which evidence matters more, old letters from Boston or the actual work she's doing here now?" It wasn't enough to sway everyone, but it planted doubt, and doubt was something. That night, Silas found evidence of his own. Pemberton had been working with Hargrave, promising him a partnership in the railroad company in exchange for helping turn the town against Theodora. The messages were carefully coded, but the intent was clear. "He's been orchestrating this from the start," Silas said, "using Hargrave as his inside man." They confronted Hargrave privately. The man denied it at first, then admitted it when faced with the evidence. "Pemberton's offering me a fortune, more money than this town will ever make from mining. Why shouldn't I take it?" "Because you're selling out your own community," Theodora said quietly. "You're helping him destroy a teacher because she wouldn't sleep with him. You're making the same choice every person in Boston made, protecting power instead of truth." Hargrave's face flushed. "You don't understand business." "No," Silas said. "I understand decency, and you don't have any." Word of Hargrave's betrayal spread quickly. Some people were shocked. Others shrugged it off. But it added another layer of doubt about Pemberton's motives. Still, the pressure continued. Now, Theodora was down to just 5 students. The barn felt empty. And then Ruth got hurt. It was a stupid accident, the kind that happened 100 times on a frontier ranch without consequence. Ruth was riding one of the gentler horses, practicing what Theodora had been teaching about independence and capability. A snake spooked the horse. Ruth fell. She hit her head on a rock and didn't move. They carried her to the house and sent for the doctor from the next town. While they waited, Ruth drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes rambling. Theodora sat by her bedside holding the girl's hand and felt her world crumbling. This was her fault. She'd taught Ruth to be brave, to try things, to push boundaries. She'd given a 9-year-old girl glasses and told her the world was hers to explore. And now Ruth was hurt, maybe dying because of it. The doctor arrived the next morning. He examined Ruth carefully, checked her pupils, tested her responses. Concussion, he said finally. Bad one. She'll need rest. Might have headaches for months. But she should recover. The relief was overwhelming, but it didn't stop the whispers. That teacher filled the girl's head with ideas. Made her think she could ride like a boy. This is what happens when you let women teach unsuitable things. Pemberton, of course, expressed deep concern. I hope the child recovers fully, but this does illustrate my point about Miss Winter's influence. Encouraging girls to engage in dangerous activities to ignore proper boundaries. It's exactly the kind of reckless thinking I warned about. That night, Theodora sat alone in the barn and finally broke. She'd fought for 2 months, fought against Pemberton, against doubt, against the weight of her own past. She'd built something fragile and beautiful and watched him systematically destroy it. And now a child was hurt, possibly because of her teaching. Maybe Pemberton was right. Maybe she was dangerous. Maybe her ideas did cause harm. Maybe the Boston board had been right to dismiss her right to protect students from someone who didn't know when to stop pushing. She put her head in her hands and wept. That was where Silas found her. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside her and waited. I can't do this anymore, Theodora said finally. I thought I was strong enough, but I'm not. Every time I think I'm winning, he finds a new way to destroy me. And now Ruth's hurt, and people are saying it's my fault. And maybe they're right. Ruth fell off a horse, Silas said quietly. That's not your fault. I taught her she could do anything. I gave her confidence. I pushed her to try things. Yes, you did. And she's braver for it. Stronger. More capable. That doesn't change because she had an accident. Pemberton's going to win, Theodora said. Just like he won in Boston. He has more power, more resources, more credibility. And I'm just a disgraced teacher in a barn with 5 students. Silas took her hand. You know what I see when I look at you. Someone who was destroyed and rebuilt herself. Someone who came to Montana with nothing and created something beautiful. Someone who sees a 12-year-old girl hiding her intelligence and says, you matter, your mind matters. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. It's not enough. Maybe not. But it's something. And sometimes something is all you need to start with. He pulled her close. I love you. Margaret loves you. Ruth loves you even lying in that bed with a concussion. We're not giving up on you. Don't give up on yourself. Theodora leaned against him and let herself be held. She didn't know if he was right. Didn't know if love and loyalty were enough to beat money and power. But she knew she was tired of running, tired of letting Pemberton win. Tomorrow, she said quietly, I'm going to talk to the Territorial Education Board. File a formal complaint. Force them to investigate both of us, not just take his word. That's dangerous. They might rule against you. I know. But at least I'll be fighting. That's better than hiding. The next morning, Ruth woke up clear-headed. Her first words were, Miss Theo. Theodora rushed to her bedside. I'm here. Did I miss school? Despite everything, Theodora laughed. Yes, quite a lot of it. I want to keep learning, even if my head hurts, even if people say I shouldn't. Ruth's eyes were fierce. "You taught me I could be smart and strong. I'm not giving that up." Looking at this 9-year-old girl, bruised and stubborn, and refusing to be diminished, Theodora felt something shift inside her. Ruth had fallen and was getting back up. Margaret had stood in front of hostile adults and defended her. These children who had every reason to be scared were being brave. She could be brave too. "All right," Theodora said. "Then we keep fighting." And for the first time since Pemberton arrived, she believed they might actually win. The Territorial Education Board office in Helena was smaller than Theodora expected. Just 3 men sitting behind a long table looking tired and skeptical. She stood before them with Silas beside her and tried not to feel like she was back in Boston facing another board that had already decided her fate. "Miss Winters," the chairman said, shuffling papers, "you filed a complaint regarding Mr. Aldrich Pemberton's allegations against you. That's a serious step." "His allegations are lies," Theodora said, "and I have evidence to prove it." She laid out everything they'd gathered. Student portfolios showing dramatic improvement, testimonials from families, Margaret's detailed documentation, letters from other towns where Pemberton had worked showing a pattern of targeting women, the coded messages between Pemberton and Hargrave proving coordination. The board members examined it all with expressions that gave nothing away. "This is compelling," one of them said finally. "But Mr. Pemberton has documentation as well. Letters, sworn testimony from Boston." "How do we determine which evidence is authentic?" "By looking at outcomes," Theodora said. "Pemberton's evidence is from 2 years ago. Mine is from now. He says I'm unfit to teach, but my students are thriving, which matters more. What someone claims I did or what I'm actually doing. The law requires credentials," the chairman said. "You were stripped of yours in Boston. The law also requires fairness. I was never given a chance to defend myself there. The board believed one man's word over mine because he had power, and I didn't. Are you going to make the same choice?" The chairman was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We'll investigate both claims. Mr. Pemberton will be asked to appear for questioning. Until we reach a determination, you may continue teaching. But Miss Winters, understand that if we rule against you, you'll be barred from teaching in Montana Territory permanently." It was better than nothing, but barely. Walking out of the office, Theodora felt exhausted. What if they rule against me anyway? Silas took her hand. "Then we fight the ruling, or we move somewhere they can't reach us. Or we keep teaching regardless of what they say. But we don't give up. I'm tired of fighting." "I know. But you're good at it anyway." They stayed in Helena that night in a small boarding house with thin walls and lumpy mattresses. Theodora couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about hearing the board's skeptical faces. Pemberton's smooth confidence. He'd beaten her in Boston with less evidence than he had now. Why would Montana be different? Around midnight, there was a knock on their door. Silas opened it to find a young man in a railroad uniform. "Message for Miss Winters." He handed over an envelope and disappeared before they could ask questions. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Expensive stock, written in elegant script. "Miss Winters, I believe we should talk privately before this matter proceeds further. I'm staying at the Grand Hotel. Come alone tomorrow at noon. I promise you'll find the conversation enlightening. A. Pemberton. Theodora's hands shook reading it. He wants to meet. It's a trap, Silas said immediately. Probably. But I'm going anyway. Then I'm coming with you. He said alone. I don't care what he said. Silas's voice was firm. You're not facing him without backup. In the end, they compromised. Silas would wait in the hotel lobby while Theodora met Pemberton in the restaurant. Public enough to be safe, private enough to talk. The Grand Hotel restaurant was elegant in that frontier way, trying hard to be Eastern and not quite succeeding. Pemberton sat at a corner table, coffee in front of him, looking like he belonged there, like he belonged everywhere. He stood when Theodora approached. Miss Winters, thank you for coming. What do you want? Please sit. Let's be civilized. Theodora sat, keeping her hands in her lap so he wouldn't see them trembling. Pemberton smiled. You've done well for yourself here. A barn schoolroom, a cowboy husband, a frontier life. It's quite the fall from headmistress of Belmont Academy, but I suppose it's better than starving in Boston. Say what you came to say. Very well. I'm prepared to offer you a deal. He leaned forward. Withdraw your complaint to the territorial board. Leave Copper Ridge quietly. In return, I'll ensure the railroad deal goes through without mentioning your name. The town gets its prosperity, you get to disappear somewhere else and start over. Again. No, you haven't heard the alternative yet. His voice turned cold. If you insist on this fight, I'll destroy you. Not just your teaching career this time. Everything. Your marriage will be investigated. Mr. Brennan's ranch will face scrutiny. Those girls he's raising, I'll make sure questions are asked about whether a man living alone with 3 young girls is appropriate. I'll ruin all of you. Theodora felt ice in her veins. You would hurt children to get to me. I would do whatever necessary to remind you of your place, which is wherever I say it is. Pemberton's mask of civility cracked slightly. You humiliated me, Theodora. When you rejected me, when you fought back, you made me look weak. I can't allow that. I won't allow it. So this was never about protecting children or moral standards. It's about your ego. It's about power. And the fact that women like you need to learn that you don't get to say no to men like me without consequences. Theodora stood up. I already learned that lesson in Boston. And here's what I learned: consequences go both ways. You destroyed my career, but I survived. I rebuilt. And every day I teach those children, I prove that your power has limits. We'll see about that. Pemberton's smile returned. The hearing is in 3 days. I'll have new evidence by then. Witnesses who'll testify to seeing inappropriate behavior between you and Mr. Brennan before your marriage. Letters suggesting you fled Boston owing debts. By the time I'm done, you won't be able to teach anywhere in the West. You'd fabricate all that. I won't have to fabricate much. People believe what they want to believe, and they want to believe that a woman like you, educated and opinionated, and refusing to know her place is dangerous. I just have to give them permission to act on that belief. Theodora looked at this man who'd ruined her life and realized something. He was afraid. Underneath all the threats and power plays, he was terrified. Terrified that if she succeeded, if she proved a woman could survive his attempts to destroy her, it would undermine everything he'd built his life on. You're going to lose, she said quietly. Maybe not today. Maybe not at the hearing, but eventually. Because I'm not alone anymore, and the truth is stronger than your lies. The truth, Pemberton laughed. The truth is whatever I say it is. I have money influence institutions backing me. You have a barn and some children who can read. Who do you think the board will believe? Theodora walked away without answering. But as she left, she saw something in his eyes that gave her hope. He wasn't as confident as he pretended to be. The 3 days before the hearing passed in a blur. Theodora taught her 5 remaining students with fierce determination, as if each lesson might be her last. She documented everything prepared. Her testimony helped Silas and the others gather more evidence, but she also made time for something else. One evening, she asked Silas to go riding with her. They rode out to a hill overlooking the ranch, watching the sun set over Montana territory. No talk of hearings or evidence or Pemberton, just the 2 of them and the vast sky. When this is over, Silas said quietly, however it turns out, I want you to know something. What? You've already won. Not the hearing, maybe, but the thing that matters. You came here broken and ashamed, believing Pemberton's lies about your worth. And you've proven every one of those lies wrong. You're a brilliant teacher, a brave woman, someone who looks at injustice and fights back even when it costs you everything. He turned to face her. That's victory, not what some board decides. What you've become despite everything he did to you. Theodora felt tears on her cheeks. I'm scared I'm going to lose again. Then we'll lose together, and we'll figure out what comes next together. You're not alone anymore, Theodora. You'll never be alone again. She kissed him there on the hilltop, as the sun painted the sky gold and orange and red. And for just a moment she let herself believe that love might be enough. The hearing was held in the largest courtroom in Helena, and it was packed. News had spread across the territory about the disgraced Boston teacher fighting a railroad magnate. People came from miles around to watch. Theodora sat at the front with Silas Vera and Pastor Cole. Across the aisle, Pemberton sat with Daniel Hargrave and 2 lawyers in expensive suits. He looked calm, confident, like a man who'd already won. The Territorial Education Board took their seats. The chairman banged his gavel. We're here to determine the fitness of Theodora Winters to teach in Montana Territory and to investigate allegations made by Mr. Aldrich Pemberton regarding her past conduct. He looked at Pemberton. Mr. Pemberton, you've made serious claims. Present your evidence. Pemberton stood smoothing his expensive suit. Thank you. I've known Miss Winters for years. She was a teacher at an institution where I served on the board. He produced a leather folder. I have letters here written by Miss Winters herself, demonstrating an inappropriate fixation on me despite my married status. He laid them out one by one. Theodora's stomach turned looking at them. The forgeries were good. Her handwriting or close enough. Intimate language she would never have written. I also have sworn testimony from colleagues who witnessed Miss Winters teaching unsuitable subjects. Natural philosophy that contradicted scripture. Mathematics deemed unnecessary for young ladies. Encouragement of unwomanly ambitions. He paused. Furthermore, I have the formal dismissal letter from Belmont Academy's board signed by all members stating clearly that Miss Winters posed a danger to students. The board members examined each document. One frowned. Another made notes. I don't bring these concerns lightly. Pemberton continued, his voice dripping false concern. But Miss Winters represents exactly the kind of dangerous influence we must guard against. Teaching children, especially girls, to question authority, to pursue education beyond their station, to believe they can challenge the natural order. This isn't education. It's corruption. He sat down. The room was heavy with the weight of his words, his evidence, his authority. The chairman turned to Theodora. Miss Winters, you may present your defense. Theodora stood. Her hands were steady now. Everything Mr. Pemberton just said is either a lie or a distortion. The letters are forgeries. I never wrote them. The testimony is from people who were pressured or paid. The dismissal was orchestrated by a man whose advances I rejected. She stepped forward. But I'm not here to prove his evidence is false. I'm here to prove mine is real. She presented her own evidence. Student portfolios showing dramatic progress. Ruth's reading scores. Lily's arithmetic. Margaret's advanced work. These children couldn't read 3 months ago. Now they can. Is that dangerous teaching? Testimonials from families filled the air. Vera Walsh stood. My nephew is 10. He couldn't read before Miss Winters. Now he reads the newspaper to me every morning. That's not corruption. That's salvation. Pastor Cole rose. My daughter asked me last week why the sky is blue. I didn't know the answer. But Miss Winters taught her. Not about defying God, but about understanding His creation. There's nothing unsuitable about knowledge. Margaret walked to the front, clutching her portfolio. 12 years old, facing down a room of adults and a man who wanted to destroy her teacher. I'm Margaret Brennan. Before Miss Winters came, I hid my mother's science books because I was ashamed of being smart. I thought intelligence made me broken. Miss Winters taught me different. She held up her calculations. This is compound interest mathematics. I solved a problem Miss Winters said she didn't expect me to solve for another year. But she gave me the chance anyway. She believed I could do it. And I did. Margaret turned to Pemberton. You say teaching girls is dangerous. Maybe it is dangerous. To you. Because if we learn to think, we might realize we don't have to listen to men who lie. The courtroom erupted. Some gasped. Others murmured agreement. Pemberton's face went red. That's enough, the chairman said. But there was something in his voice, not anger, consideration. Before Pemberton could respond, Silas stood. I have evidence about why Mr. Pemberton is really here. He presented the coded messages, explained the coordination with Hargrave, laid bare the railroad scheme Pemberton would get. Hargrave a partnership. Hargrave would turn the town against. Theodora, the railroad deal would go through and Theodora would be destroyed in the process. This isn't about protecting children, Silas said. It's about a man who can't stand that a woman told him no and survived to talk about it. One of the board members leaned forward. Mr. Pemberton, these messages suggest your complaint is motivated by personal vendetta rather than legitimate concern. Those are private business communications taken out of context, Pemberton protested. They're proof, Theodora said quietly. That everything you've said about me is designed to destroy my life because I refuse to let you destroy my body. The words hung in the air, direct, unflinching. True. Vera stood again. I have one more thing. She pulled out letters. I contacted 3 towns where Mr. Pemberton worked railroad deals. In each town, a woman in authority was dismissed shortly after his visit. A teacher, an editor, a postmistress, all accused of moral failings, all replaced by men. Miss Winters isn't the first. She's just the first one who fought back. The chairman looked at Pemberton. Do you have an explanation for this pattern? Coincidence? Rumors? Women who failed at their positions and blame me rather than accept responsibility. 3 towns. 3 women. The same pattern. The chairman's voice was cold now. That's not coincidence, Mr. Pemberton. The board conferred for a long time. Theodora sat in silence, watching their faces, trying to read expressions that gave nothing away. Silas's hand found hers under the table. Warm, steady, present. Finally, the chairman banged his gavel. We've reached a decision. Theodora held her breath. Regarding the allegations from Boston, we find them troubling but unproven. Mr. Pemberton has documentation, but Miss Winters has raised credible questions about authenticity. More significantly, Mr. Pemberton's conduct during this proceeding, including coordination with business interests, to pressure Miss Winters' dismissal, undermines his credibility. Pemberton's jaw tightened. Regarding Miss Winters' teaching in Montana Territory, the evidence is clear. Her students have shown remarkable progress. Families testify to her dedication. Her methods produce results. The chairman paused. However, Miss Winters does not hold a valid teaching credential from any recognized institution. We cannot simply ignore legal requirements. Theodora felt her heart sink. Therefore, we are issuing a conditional ruling. Miss Winters may continue teaching under a provisional frontier teaching permit, valid for 2 years. During that time, she will be subject to annual reviews of student outcomes. If at the end of 2 years her students continue to show progress and no legitimate complaints have been filed, the permit will become permanent. It wasn't full vindication, but it wasn't destruction either. As for Mr. Pemberton, we are forwarding our findings to the Montana Pacific Railroad Board of Directors. Your use of business leverage to pursue personal vendettas is inappropriate and raises serious questions about your fitness to represent the company. Pemberton stood. This is outrageous. You came here to destroy a woman who rejected you. The chairman said bluntly, your evidence may have been compelling, but your motives were not. This hearing is adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Theodora sat frozen, trying to process what had just happened. She'd won. Not completely. Not perfectly. But she'd won. Silas pulled her into his arms. You did it. We did it, Theodora said. All of us. Outside the courthouse, Pemberton caught up with them. His face was tight with fury. This isn't over, he said to Theodora. Yes, Theodora said quietly. It is. Everyone just saw what you really are, not a concerned citizen, not a respectable businessman, a man who destroys women for saying no. That's all anyone will remember. You've made an enemy. I already had one. I survived him." She looked Pemberton in the eyes. "You don't scare me anymore. You tried to break me in Boston and I rebuilt. You tried to destroy me here and I fought back. What else can you do to me that you haven't already done?" For just a moment, she saw something in his face. Not quite fear, but recognition. He'd lost. Not just the hearing, but his power over her. He turned and walked away without another word. Theodora watched him go and felt something loosen in her chest. The fear that had lived there for 2 years. The constant weight of shame and anger and helplessness. It was still there, but smaller now, manageable. The ride back to Copper Ridge took 2 days. When they arrived, the town had organized a celebration. Not everyone came. Some people still believed Pemberton's allegations, still thought Theodora was unsuitable. But enough people came. Enough families brought their children back to her classes. Enough voices spoke up to say she'd earned her place. The barn schoolroom filled up again. 10 students, then 12, then 15. Theodora taught with renewed purpose, knowing that every lesson was proof that she belonged here. 6 months later, on a warm June evening, Theodora stood on the porch of the ranch house and looked out over land that had become home. The barn was full of students. The ranch was thriving, and tomorrow they were breaking ground on a real schoolhouse in town, built with funds donated by families who believed in what she was doing. Silas came out to join her, sliding an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about? About how far we've come? 6 months ago, I thought Pemberton would destroy everything. Now I have a real teaching permit, a school being built, more students than I can handle alone. You're going to need help." "I know. Vera's niece is interested in training as a teacher, and Margaret wants to assist with the younger children while she studies for her university entrance exams." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky. "I got a letter today," Theodora said, "from one of the women in Silver Bow. The teacher Pemberton had dismissed. She read about the hearing in the newspaper. She's thinking about fighting for her position back. Will she? I don't know. But she said reading about someone who fought and won gave her hope." Theodora paused. "That's something, isn't it? That my survival might help someone else survive." "That's everything," Silas said. Inside the house, Theodora could hear the girls getting ready for bed. Lily practicing her reading aloud, stumbling over words but persistent. Ruth arguing with Margaret about mathematics, their voices rising and falling in familiar patterns. The sounds of a family. She'd come to Montana with nothing. No job, no home, no hope. Just a carpet bag and a stack of newspaper clippings that said she was worthless. Now she had a husband who loved her. Children who needed her. Work that mattered. A community she'd earned through competence and courage. Not everyone accepted her. Not everyone believed in what she was doing. But enough people did. Enough people had chosen her over Pemberton's lies. That was victory. Not perfect, not complete, but real. "Theodora," Silas said quietly, "are you happy?" She thought about the question. Happy felt too simple for what she felt. She'd been destroyed and rebuilt. She'd fought battles she shouldn't have had to fight. She'd lost things that couldn't be recovered. Happiness didn't quite capture the complexity of surviving trauma and finding purpose on the other side, but it was close enough. "Yes," she said, "I think I am." A year later, Theodora stood in front of the new schoolhouse watching as children filed in for the first day of the term. 23 students, now boys and girls ranging from 6 to 14. Vera's niece, Emma, stood beside her nervous and excited about her first day as assistant teacher. "What if I mess up?" Emma whispered. "You will," Theodora said. "Everyone does. The trick is learning from it and trying again." Inside the schoolhouse smelled of new wood and chalk dust, desks arranged in neat rows, a blackboard on the wall, books on shelves donated by families across the territory. It wasn't Belmont Academy. It was better, because this was hers, built by a community that believed in her, earned through work, not granted by credentials. Margaret sat in the front row helping the younger children settle in. She'd passed her university entrance exams with the highest scores the examiner had ever seen. She'd start in Helena in the fall, the first girl from Copper Ridge to attend university. But for now, she was here helping. Miss Winters. One of the new students raised his hand. "Is it true you came here from Boston?" "Yes." "Why'd you leave? Boston's a real city, not like here." Theodora thought about how to answer. She could give the sanitized version. Talk about wanting a fresh start, about the appeal of frontier life. But these children deserve truth. "I left because powerful people in Boston decided I wasn't suitable to teach. They were wrong, but they had the authority to act on their wrongness. So I came here where I could prove them wrong through my work." "Did you prove them wrong?" Theodora looked around the classroom, at students who'd learned to read, to calculate, to think critically, at Margaret preparing for university, at Ruth wearing her new glasses proudly, the replacement pair that had arrived from Helena, at the community that had fought for her right to teach. "Yes," she said, "I think I did." That evening, as Theodora walked home with Silas, she felt at peace. The land was still hard, still unforgiving, but it was beautiful too. Open and vast and full of possibility. "Do you ever think about Boston?" Silas asked. "Sometimes, but not the way I used to." Theodora paused. "I used to think about what I'd lost. The prestige, the position, the career I'd built. Now I think about what I gained instead, which is freedom. In Boston, I was always trying to prove I deserved to be there, always walking a tightrope between being competent enough to keep my position and not so competent that I threatened men's egos. Here I just teach. I just do the work. And that's enough." They reached the ranch as darkness fell. Inside, Lily was setting the table for dinner. Ruth was reading by lamplight. Margaret was studying. A family. Not the one Theodora had imagined for herself back in Boston, but the one she'd built from the wreckage of her old life. Later, after dinner, after the girls had gone to bed, Theodora sat at the kitchen table with her lesson plans for the next week. So much to teach. So many minds to shape. So many children who deserved to know their worth. There was a knock at the door. Silas answered it to find a young woman standing on the porch, carpetbag in hand, looking lost and desperate and hopeful all at once. "I'm looking for Theodora Winters," she said. "I heard she teaches here. I heard she takes students nobody else wants." Theodora joined Silas at the door. "I'm Theodora Winters. My name is Alice Harper. I was a teacher in Denver. I was dismissed for teaching unsuitable subjects. I read about you in the newspaper, about how you fought back, and I thought maybe if you could do it, I could too. I don't have credentials anymore, but I can teach, and I'm willing to work for room and board if you'll train me." Theodora looked at this young woman and saw herself 2 years ago, broken and ashamed and still somehow hoping. "Come in," she said. "We'll figure it out." As Alice stepped inside, Theodora caught Silas's eye. He smiled, understanding. This was what victory looked like. Not just surviving, not just rebuilding her own life, but creating a path for others to follow. Showing women who'd been told they were worthless that they had value. That competence mattered more than credentials. That truth was stronger than lies. That they could fight and win. The lamp burned late that night as Theodora talked with Alice, sharing her story, offering hope. Outside Montana territory stretched dark and vast under a sky full of stars. And somewhere in Boston, the board that had dismissed her went about its business, never knowing that the woman they destroyed had built something better than anything they'd ever created. Something that would last long after they were forgotten. Something that would change the world one student at a time.